Good evening, YouTube. #newbie here. It seems to be a lovely evening here in Manchester. You can just see the sun setting on the horizon over there, and yeah, it's awesome. So, the $1 million question: is a 600 a good starter bike? Is a 600 a good starter bike? Now, that's the question that I see quite a lot in a lot of like MotoVlogs and stuff like that. On forums, people asking questions whether, hey, I just got my MSF, or I just passed my test, and should I get a 600cc, or should I start small from like a 250 or a 300? Well, I'm going to give my thoughts on that. Here in the United Kingdom, things are a little bit different. If you're over the age of 24, you can do your test and jump right onto like a 600 or whatever the hell you want. Or if you're under that, there are a number of different rules that kind of apply. But the sort of route that a lot of people take here in the United Kingdom is they'll get their CBT, which is sort of like a one-day course that you do to teach you sort of like motorcycle handling and safety and, you know, road maneuverability and stuff like that. And once you get your CBT, let me just get around this roundabout, then I'll continue talking about my thoughts on whether you should get a 600cc as your first bike. So, as I was saying, you do your CBT, get your certificate, and that allows you to ride up to a 125cc bike. So that's the kind of route a lot of people take because they want to get familiar with the bike, they want to learn with the bike and stuff like that. So they go out and get themselves a 125cc, and that's what they ride around. And CBTs last 2 years, so if you haven't taken your full bike test within 2 years, you have to renew your CBT for another 2 years. For a lot of people, once they've done their CBT, ride around for a bit on a 125cc. This bloody sat nav. So a lot of people, what they do is they get their CBT, ride around on a 125cc for a bit. When they feel they're a little bit confident, then they go out and go and do their test so that they can ride any size of bike they like. So that is the route that I took. But I do know that people do sometimes skip the whole CBT thing and just like do their test and jump onto like a 600 or 1,000 or stuff like that. But it's all good. So coming back to 125cc CBT. So that's the route that I took. I got my CBT. Then I got onto a 125cc. It was a Yamaha YZF R125. So I had that for about a year, and that's what I used to learn on. You know, learn the motorcycle craft, get used to motorcycle controls, get more confident on the road, and all that kind of stuff on two wheels, because it's kind of a different perspective to driving, because I've been driving since about 2000. So, but when you're on two wheels, it's a slightly different perspective. It's kind of different because it's just you, two wheels, and the road. So it's different from a car where you've got that sort of like surround around you and stuff like that. So and now here is where I'm going to tell you that it was good for me to start with a 125 for the following reasons. Number one, on a 125cc bike, you don't have as much power as you do on a 600. Because if you consider my bike that I have now, which is the CBR 600RR, it can put out 115 brake horsepower at the back wheel. So Whereas my R125 could only put out 14 point something, but I'm gonna say 15 for argument's sake. So one of the reasons why it's a good idea at least it was a good idea for me to start in 125cc, is that because it doesn't have as much power, it allows me to make all the mistakes without getting in trouble. Because you see this throttle hand? This throttle can get you into trouble. So imagine if you have 115 brake horsepower on your wrist and you're still getting used to motorcycle craft and you make a mistake. That can get you in a lot of trouble. It can give you some real hurt. Whereas if you're starting with a smaller horsepower vehicle, even if you do make a mistake, it's not going to be as bad, though it can still be bad. So even though it's not as bad on a small horsepower vehicle, but it can be just as bad. But at least at smaller power, there's smaller damage you can do to yourself, and it allows you to make all the mistakes. So that's one reason why, oh, look at that beautiful sunset. So that's one of the reasons why it was good for me to start on a 125cc bike. So, reason number two. Starting on a smaller bike lets you get used to a motorcycle. It allows you to get used to the controls, the sort of muscle movements that you need to control a motorcycle. Because trust me, it takes a while to get used to. At least for me, it took a while to get used to. So you get to get used to the muscle control, the controls of a motorcycle, maneuverability of a motorcycle, and how to properly ride a motorcycle. Because sure, it looks easy enough, but it's not that easy when you're actually doing it. There are certain fundamental rules that you have to understand about riding a motorcycle. And if you don't understand those fundamental rules, the laws of physics will teach you a lesson. So, you know, things like cornering. How do you corner on a motorcycle? Stuff like, what's the right way to brake on a motorcycle? What's the right way to go through the gears on a motorcycle? What's the right way to sit on a motorcycle? So, because it's a little bit different compared to, like if you're comparing a sports bike and a naked bike. Whereas a naked bike is more upright, with a sports bike you're leaning. But if you're leaning on the tank, you have to sit a specific way, otherwise your wrists are gonna hurt you. After you ride for a little bit, you're gonna start feeling soreness in the wrists. So, I'm just gonna say for a sports bike, like this one for example, you have to sit and then use the pressure in your legs to hold on to the bike. So your hands are sort of like almost suspended in a way, even though you're holding the controls with your hands, but your hands take care of the steering. But actually securing yourself to the bike is done with your legs. So these are all things that you've got to learn when riding, say, a sports bike, for example. But there are a lot of like common principles between bikes. But when you start with a smaller bike, it gives you the ability to learn how to ride a motorcycle properly. Properly in a sort of like, I'm going to say in quotes, safe context, because you don't have as much power to get you into trouble. So once you learn like the proper motorcycle craft with a smaller bike, then when you move on to a bigger bike, it just comes natural. Everything just flows because you're so used to it. You've just got more power, and you've just got to get used to the additional power. because you already have the skill. And then before long, you're going to get used to your 600cc bike. So that's the second reason why it was good for me to start on a 125cc. There are people out there who motorcycling comes to them naturally. They just hop onto a bike and then it just kind of flows. They don't really have to work hard at it. But for me, I had to work hard at motorcycling. It did not come to me naturally. So it took me quite a while to get used to bike craft, the motorcycle craft, and how to maneuver a motorcycle controls, and all that kind of stuff. So that's two reasons why I think it was good for me to start on a 125cc. But let me think, are there any other reasons why I think it's a good idea? Let me see. Alright. Okay. Here's probably another reason, but it's a debatable reason. Because nowadays, 125cc bikes, new ones, are not that cheap. So, but you could argue that because 125cc bikes cost less than 600cc bikes, brand new, I'm not talking about used, it could be a good idea to start on a smaller bike. I'm just using 125cc here because that's what I did, and those were the options that were available to me. But I know in many parts of the world, you could probably start on a 250 or 300 or something like that, but the same principle kind of applies. So, for argument's sake, if you start on a smaller bike, if you damage the bike, it's still a cheaper outcome. It's more cost effective than for you to go out and buy yourself a brand new 600cc motorcycle and crash it. That is gonna hurt you bad. Your pocket and maybe your body too, if you're not wearing all the gear all the time. I have another video about all the gear all the time, as in whether it's worth it to wear all the gear or get lazy and not wear all the gear. So those reasons are the reasons why I feel it's better to start on a smaller bike. But if motorcycling comes to you naturally, then I guess it's a kind of different story, so it doesn't really matter what you start on. But I cannot stress enough the importance of learning proper motorcycle craft. That is so important out here in the streets. You have to learn how to ride a motorcycle properly. So starting on a smaller bike gives you that ability to learn how to ride a motorcycle properly. Learn all the techniques, make all the mistakes, and then move on to your bigger bike, which gives you more power and more fun. So, you guys out there, what are your thoughts on starting on a smaller bike? What are your stories? What are your experiences? Whatever it may be, drop a comment right there and let me know. Let's discuss.